On September 17th, 1787, the delegates in Philadelphia signed the U.S. Constitution and launched a bold experiment in self-government 238 years ago. It was nothing short of revolutionary because for nearly all of human history, societies organized themselves under authoritarian rule. Kings, emperors, warlords. Authoritarianism is not the exception and tends to be the natural instinct of the human condition. To break that instinct required something rare, and the Western European Enlightenment was that moment. A population isolated from the seat of power, separated by an ocean, enough wealth to allow citizens to debate ideas beyond mere survival, enough education to nurture critical thought, and enough courage to attempt what history said was impossible. That individuals could be sovereign and that power could be dispersed and balanced rather than concentrated in one ruler. It was in many ways the perfect elixir at the perfect moment, a convergence of ideas, resources, and daring that produced one of history's most remarkable achievements. But we must never forget that America did not lack for people with authoritarian tendency. In fact, we all know what that looks like in our own lives. The boss who will never listen, the head of the neighborhood HOA who will do whatever it takes to impose their will over your yard. And the military often attracts this type of personality as well, drawn to its rigid chain of command and projection of power. Which is exactly why the framers placed strict limitations on how the military could be used on home soil. Because they knew that authoritarian instincts are ever present, and they sought to keep them from overwhelming our free society. But in the last 5 decades, something has shifted. For most of our history, authoritarian personalities were scattered. Some leaning one way, some the other, many finding no clear political home. Yet, more recently, they have begun to concentrate. A style of leadership emerged that spoke directly to their instincts, promising order and obedience over debate, loyalty to a leader over loyalty to the system itself. The result? What was once spread broadly across society has now coagulated into a few influential blocks. Our framers understood this danger. James Madison, writing in Federalist Number 10, cautioned that the infection of violent passions can consume a free society when faction overwhelms reasoned debate. And in Federalist Number 1, Alexander Hamilton warned that men who overturn republics commence demagogues and end as tyrants. They knew the authoritarian temptation would always exist, and they designed a system to check it. The separation of powers, federalism, and the rule of law were deliberate attempts to marginalize authoritarian instincts in favor of balance and personal liberty. That is why vigilance matters. This is not about left versus right or conservative versus liberal anymore. It is about personality and outlook. Do we elevate obedience or do we elevate liberty? Do we empower fear or do we empower trust in each other? Authoritarianism will always be with us, woven into human nature. But the genius of the Constitution was that it created a framework where authoritarian impulses could be concentrated, where power could be dispersed, where no one man's will could dominate a free people. So, on this Constitution Day, we should remember that liberty is not our natural state. Authoritarianism is. And what makes America exceptional and great is that we dared to marginalize it for the sake of balance, for the sake of sovereignty, for the sake of individual liberty. But that system requires constant nurturing, constant care. It requires education that teaches not just facts, but also empowers civic trust. It requires prosperity broad enough to give more people a stake in the system. And it requires citizens who understand that liberty is never free, never permanent, and never guaranteed. If we fail in that vigilance, the natural tendency of humanity will reassert itself. Authoritarianism will rise, not in scattered individuals, but in one consolidated movement. And the miracle of Philadelphia will be remembered not as a living republic, but as a fleeting detour in humanity's long march. That is why today, 238 years after the signing of our Constitution, we must take up the work of reviving our republic, not as partisans, but as citizens. The framers showed us that liberty can triumph over the authoritarian instinct, but only if each generation chooses it again. And our generation must not be the one that fails.